Yeah, and we're gonna dive in a little bit here in a moment into some specifics around accountability and how you can improve your accountability not only to yourself but to others. And that's a good little, maybe a starting point right there. Is, where does it fit in? When are you meant to be accountable to yourself? When are you meant to be accountable to somebody else? Is one better, more powerful, more effective than the other? Or do you think it's maybe based on obviously who you are and what you need as an individual? And in the context of joining a real estate team too would be helpful. Welcome back, everyone, to the Relevant Agent Podcast. I'm excited about this one because this is our second in a series we talked about last time. And if you didn't catch the last one, make sure to look for that last post we had, or that last session we had, because Alex and I have committed to sharing with you some really important strategies, at least that have helped us over our career, certainly, and have helped currently, for Alex's team. And we're trying to implement those, that your team is trying to implement those right now to be successful in 2025. So we're talking about, as we approach the tail end of the year, to really bring up things that are going to be specific and helpful for you to be successful in 2025. And Alex, this one I really enjoy because without this, although it's a little more high level, without this, you're not really going to build anything, no matter how fancy a widget you and I share with our audience. You're stuck at zero, I think, without the magic word of accountability. What do you think?
Yeah, we spoke about it a little bit off camera here, and I think it's a concept we've talked about quite a bit. So yeah, accountability has been it's the foundation. I mean, discipline is a part of accountability, but like, if I was to just say, look, if you can hold yourself accountable or get into an accountability group, that's going to help you immensely.
Yeah, and we're gonna dive in a little bit here in a moment into some specifics around accountability and how you can improve your accountability not only to yourself but to others. And that's a good little, maybe a starting point right there. Is, where does it fit in? When are you meant to be accountable to yourself? When are you meant to be accountable to somebody else? Is one better, more powerful, more effective than the other? Or do you think it's maybe based on obviously who you are and what you need as an individual? And in the context of joining a real estate team too would be helpful.
I think the root of the question, I think you have to be accountable to yourself, because you can put in numbers. You could go, let's just say you said, okay, I want to be held accountable, and you got this accountability system. We're going to kind of talk about some of them here in a second. If you're just throwing numbers in there to throw numbers in there to make other people look like you're accountable, you're only bullshitting yourself. So for me, that accountability form, I've mentioned it before, this daily habit tracker has been huge for me. And that's just a piece of paper. That's been for me. I actually started that. I got to take that back. I started that when I went into Bold. I got that form from Bold. So each week, Bold is a 14-week program. I suggest anybody out there, if you want to kind of start to dip into accountability and there's a Bold happening around you, they do allow people from other companies to come in to Bold. That might help to kind of get your gears going for accountability in a group, and the mindset of, on there. The first one, I gotta say, man, the first one I really like because it's no complaining. That's like, people, why are you accountable with no complaining? It's like, well, because if you're looking for problems and you're complaining about things, you kind of have a bad mindset. So that first one there, you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. What's your mindset at for, like, screw this or that or whatever. So went a little sideways there. But anyways, my point was, I think to answer your question directly, you have to have accountability to yourself, and getting in a group would only help that, because now you're bullshitting others too if you're bullshitting yourself.
Okay, so basically it's both, really, right? Accountable to yourself, but also accountable to others, because I think there's value in showing up, and I think you and I have discussed it. We're accountable to each other to be here every Thursday and record this. And sometimes it's ideal, and other times it's not. Sometimes we have technical issues, and other times we don't. But the point is that we're here and we're doing it because I've committed to you and you've committed to me. And yes, part of it is me having to get up and you having to get up and being here on time. But it's also, well, the other person's expecting me to be there. So there's that component too. And I think that depending on who you are, one of them is probably a little more powerful than the other. Like, even if you're not accountable to yourself that much, but if you feel the weight or the importance of being there for the other person that you've committed to, or the other person or other people, like in this instance, a team, like your team, there's probably some guilt there if you don't show up, right? And everything we're talking about right now is still kind of really high level. We're not even talking about real estate at all, but it really applies to anything you're trying to do and keeping your promise to yourself and keeping your promise to others. And then that, if you pull that back a bit, it's like, why am I even doing this? Well, you better have strong whys as to why you're doing this to keep you accountable, to keep you motivated, to keep you moving forward. And I just think these are important things to talk about, because regardless of whether you are newer to the industry or even been in it for a while, I think these refreshes are important if you're trying to have a meaningful business.
We mentioned it. Just as a side note to that, I mentioned it last week, man. How do we like shore up if we have never been accountable or we have a problem with discipline, right? You got to attack that or work with that. And I mentioned it last week, that Hard 75 for a program you don't have to pay for. It just is like, and the Hard 75 is about, hey, did you do the 2 workouts? Did you do all these things? The things I mentioned last week. Again, it's a great mechanism to build accountability and to build discipline. So just wanted to mention that again.
So let's talk about a little bit about your spreadsheet specifically. I know that was kind of like your current iteration and what you've been working off of. Tell me a little bit more about it and what is it really tracking, and how often do you look at it or use it?
What we're using right now, the CTE?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So the CTE is called the Commitment to Excellence. That's what the acronym stands for, CTE, Commitment to Excellence. And it's essentially a spreadsheet. I'm not an Excel guy, but I know you can create fields and columns and all that kind of stuff. So he's created this interface where it tracks your business. And so the business starts at calls, contacts, appointments set, appointments met, contracts written, like all of these little particulars in there, right? Also, you can put in then overarching, what are the goals for each agent and the goals for the team. So as a leader, I can go in there and look at the CEO dashboard, and I can kind of see where we're at for our goals. Like, it has these nice kind of dials on it. Hey, this is how close you are to your goal. As far as volume, units, source of deals. So it really gives you a good diagnostic on the health or where your business is at for the goals that you have. Really granular up to the big picture.
Okay. Now, tell me about Sisu, which is not new, but it's becoming it's being offered to the team or to EXP wide, or what? How did that come about? And I know that obviously it's existed before, and what makes it? I guess we'll dive into what makes it different or better than what the current system you guys are using with CTE.
Mm-hmm. So we had used Sisu, as Sisu is an accountability goal setting tracker, if you will. Similar, it's a lot like CTE. It just has more of a robust, if you will, interface, meaning you can set kind of like other goals for the team. You can set like challenges, rewards for hitting certain things. It's more robust from what I can see, how you see the information. and that you can do challenges and all this kind of other stuff in there. So it's just kind of like it's kind of one notch up from the CTE. Uh, and what I like about it is it just kind of, I don't know, CTE looks pretty good. If you fill it out, it looks pretty darn good, man. It really gives you a good, again, to use that word, kind of diagnostic on where things are at. But Sisu just adds a little bit more.
More like is it more of a, one of the clients that we help that we've built a platform for, it's got more of a gamification to it.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good word.
Rewards you, compares you to others, kind of where your standing is. And that element psychologically has been proven to be very powerful. And so that's why it's used so often, badges and levels and rewards and, and you'll see kind of where you stack, and this person's bar is a little higher than yours. And so, that kind of triggers something in people. I was like, oh, I'm falling behind or I'm number one. And those gamification elements are certainly really powerful. So although I haven't seen the platform myself, I'm wondering if that's in there.
Yeah, it is. You hit it on the head, actually. It's got badges and rewards and yeah. So the word you use, gamification, is a great word because that's kind of what you want to do to create. I mean, games are fun. Rewards are cool to get. So it hits little dopamine stuff.
Right.
I mean, even, dude, when I go into my CTE, I get this dopamine rush of looking at where our team is at. The gamification gets you.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Add information. Huh?
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's for sure it's a real thing and a foundation for a lot of platforms because, again, to your words exactly, the dopamine hit is just a human response and we enjoy it. We like being patted on the back. We like being rewarded. We like competition, especially if we're winning. The ones that maybe are falling behind, maybe get a little more anxious or depressed about it, but hopefully it kicks them in the butt to stay on track with what they've said they were going to do. And to that point, do you put in your own goals and metrics? Do you know, or are they kind of self-assigned by the system? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so it kind of runs in a little bit of tandem with your business plan. So yes, you're going to have your own goals for amount of units you want to sell, volume you want to do. So you're going to have your own goals there. You're going to set that in. And then what we're doing right now is we're looking back in CTE for kind of like, okay, so if you sold this many units last year, right? And this is the amount of calls that you made, contacts you made, and so forth, you can actually reverse engineer that. So you can say, okay, well, if I make double the calls and I do double the amount of appointments, and this is my ratio for appointments set to appointments met to contracts written, you can kind of reverse engineer that into your goals and reset what your goals are within Sisu or CTE or whatever, or this silly little, paper sheet that you use. So that's why tracking your numbers, and we've talked about this, is so critical because then you're able to actually see what you need to do based on what you've done to achieve what you want to achieve.
Got it. Okay. Do you think that has this been implemented in any way yet, or when do you think it'll be implemented into your team specifically? And does everyone, obviously everyone gets access, will everyone need to use it?
Well, I can't say. So one of the things that I have learned is the concept of whiplashing. And as a leader, you got to be careful about whiplashing yourself, meaning you said you're going to go in a certain direction and you see something that looks kind of cool or shiny, we call them shiny objects, squirrel, like, oh, that looks cool. And you whiplash yourself from the direction that you're going, right? So just as a personal thing, you got to be careful about that. Oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to do that. It's like going to the amusement park and saying you want to ride every ride at the same time. They all look cool. So you got to pick one ride. I don't know, to answer your question directly, back to the whiplash. as a leader, if you have people in the organization, you got to be careful about, oh, we're all going this way. It's like everybody's kind of heading this way. And then you go, we're all going this way. Everybody gets whiplash, right? Because they're all heading in this direction. So I meet with my admin, anybody, again, that book or the series Traction, who's written by Gino Wickman, Floyd Wickman's son. You got to be careful about whiplashing your admin. And one of the things in the book is you got to kind of have them have the final say. Meaning, I'm the visionary as a leader. They're the ones that are going to be, she's going to be the one, Aunt Candace is going to be the one integrating any program that I'm like, we're going to go this way. My point here is you got to talk to the admin of like, okay, what are the other things that are on your plate right now? Because just because I found something cool and new that I think is going to work, well, I already found 3 or 4 other cool things that are new that are going to work. And she's like, Alex, I'm working on these. Like the pile of that you have for me to work on is here. As you add more stuff, right? So you got to be like, that's why you got to have this really good relationship and trust with your admin or the integrators of the programs that you go out and find. So I know that's a long answer. My direct answer is I don't know. I've got to talk with Candace, make sure we're not whiplashing here. Take a look at what Sisu, because Sisu is a really, I think they're giving us a watered down version, similar to like KV Core or Lofty that EXP is giving to the agents. It's not like the full Lofty. It's not the full KV Core. And I imagine Sisu is probably not the full. So we need to take kind of a look at that, see what it is, and measure it, compare it to CTE and see if we're going to, go with it.
Yeah, you took it in a interesting direction only because you really kind of put a lens on it from the perspective of a broker, team leader, as to the decision-making process there, which is great. I'm glad you brought that up because you're right. Just as much as we say a real estate agent, an independent real estate agent, the single agent could be lost in all of the things that are out there, all the tools and services that are out there. So can the leadership, especially if they feel any kind of pressure from higher above or others that are, kind of parallel to them or next to them in terms of leadership role that, should we be bringing this in? And then the other element of, okay, well, Alex isn't really doing that. You're like, to your point, you're out there thinking and looking and evaluating opportunities, but at the end of the day, you're not implementing them directly. You have help and staff to do that. And so you do have to kind of pause for a moment and not only look at the shoulders of the person who's doing the implementing for you and see how much is on those shoulders currently. Obviously get their feedback because they're in that position because they're very valuable and worthy of that position and that responsibility. And then decide if this is the right time, the right tool, and really almost basically leave it to them to see the bigger picture as well in terms of where it flows, right? And that's some of the, the honoring you need to give that position and that person that you put in that position for a reason to let them also make, potentially the decision to do it based on everything else that the team is exposed to and has available, just because we give them something else, but they already have 8 other things that they're not using or using effectively. That was a really interesting point from more of a leadership perspective. I appreciate that because it certainly makes me think of times where I'm like, I'm just in the beginning, it's trying to bring in everything I can to feel like I'm bringing value to the team. And as a leader, you're making them aware of the latest and greatest, and genuinely it could be very good, but you do have to throttle that. You have to pause for a moment and find a way to throttle that to make sure you are being effective and not just raining down on people that can't even get a grasp of the CRM in a basic format.
Yeah.
Yeah. that's really, really interesting. I like that topic. I like that angle on it. So we want to make our agents and our teams aware of what's out there. Um, do you think that, how do you see, or not do you think, how do you see technology then? And how do you see technology in terms of its fast growth and your need to keep up with it? Like, because a lot of the stuff that we do as real estate agents, a lot of it's very foundational. And at the end of the day, we just need to be engaging with people. So how much would you say being on top of it with regard to these new technologies and new systems that come down, how much pressure do you feel as a leader to have to implement them, if at all?
It's a good question. I want to make a kind of a quick observation around technology. What I'm starting to see, I think technology has a deflationary aspect to it, meaning as more technology comes out and is faster and does more. For instance, like Sisu here was rather expensive when we first integrated it about 2 years ago. It was kind of the new thing out. Kyle Whissel was endorsing it, who runs a giant team down there in San Diego. So it was like a new widget. It was a new thing. And we were like, wow, this is super, super cool. Does this robust thing. So we kind of went with it. But now I want to just kind of that observation is, wow, look at now Sisu being a part of a large company is just, you don't even have to pay for the entry level. So that deflationary side, I think, is just something I wanted to kind of, I think we're about technology, you and I, and just kind of observations on money and technology and even just, the raw, to your point about, hey, you got to make your calls. I don't care what kind of technology you got. If it's just, we don't have rotary phones anymore, but you can make a lot of calls just by doing this. You don't need a dialer and all that. So back to the question, I think you need to stay on top of it, but I think you have to have a filter. And I think that the filter is really going, okay, this thing will solve a problem, right? Or create efficiency. What is it going to take? How many hours is it going to take, A, to integrate it? What's the cost? And B, what's the time? And do you see, and then again, you have to, when we're talking about something like this, in a CRM too, it's not going to work if people don't use it. So then it's kind of like, okay, again, back to the whiplash. This is what goes on in my head. If you folks are out there kind of going, how do you think about this stuff? And Eddie framed it really well. It's like, okay, maybe this thing is a little bit better, or maybe it's 10% better, 25% better. I don't know. We got to look at what the entry level Sisu is for us and just kind of go, is it worth not whiplashing, but saying, okay, the cruise ship's going to kind of go this direction. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got to start rowing in that direction. So you have to measure, how much influence you have with the team or with yourself. Do you have enough influence to yourself to fill in the CTE sheet or the Sisu sheet? Do you have enough influence over yourself? Back to personal discipline, accountability. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's the lens I think that you look at it through and the risk reward of changing everything. Some people, I was in an accountability the other day with one of the people in our group who was thinking about changing CRMs. And I'm like, it's not just like, oh, we're going to change. It's just such a big deal to take these things on, especially changing CRMs, CTE and that's not as big, but If you don't have a CTE, if you're not using CTE, I would say go get, with the EXP or not, look at one of these programs. CTE is pretty affordable, man. I think it's like $50 a month or something. Nothing crazy.
And does Sisu actually incorporate the ACRM?
No, but it does have API stuff. It does have API stuff where it'll integrate, I believe, into Salesforce. I believe into Follow Up Boss. I'm gonna have to dig in further. Maybe we'll get Sisu on here and start asking him some questions. I did talk to them when I was down at EXPCon, and they said, sure, we'd be willing to come on. So we can maybe bring them on and talk about what their system looks like.
Yeah, I think if it were me sitting down with an agent that is considering making this change or making this addition, one of my first questions is, remember back in the day when you were thinking about getting Salesforce or Follow Up Boss, which Follow Up Boss is one I use actually, and I enjoy it. Mm-hmm. I would say, are you using it the way you thought you were going to use it? Are you leveraging it for all it's worth when you saw it as a shiny object before you started using it, when you were first introduced to it? Mm-hmm. Are you using all the features? Are you using all the automations that could happen? Are you using all the API integrations? Because those are very valuable too, to your point. That's good to hear, right? Because if you're integrating it into your current system, then you're really starting to leverage all of its features. Before you decide, are you doing that before you decide to switch over or change? Because what's going to be different? If you can honestly say you've exhausted all the features available on the platform you're currently using, and this is now in addition to, it's going to make you better, it's going to grow what you're doing now, then yeah, maybe you can consider it. But I would venture to guess that the vast majority have not leveraged their current system to the best of their ability, which means they're probably leaving those accountability efforts on the table, meaning that, they're not using it to the best of its ability. And so I would encourage, before anybody makes an additional investment, now we're just talking finances, right, is get to 100% or 95% of your current platform before you consider adding, another one. And maybe it means that before you're able, maybe you're not even that comfortable with the accountability portion of it yet, right? You're not ready to integrate it yet, which then makes me think of and ask you, Alex, what were those accountability moments for you in your career? Like that, whether it was a spreadsheet, a meeting every Thursday to somebody, a new way to meditation, anything that gave you that allowed you to become even more accountable to yourself and stay on track. So this is now peeling off some of the technology that we were just discussing, but just for some kind of a case study conversation, what are those things that you think, were really kind of pivotal for you?
I would go back, man, and it was on my first iPhone, Eddie. So this was the first time that I kind of started tracking at all. And this was probably back to when the first iPhone came out, 2009. And then I think I got maybe the app in 2010. And it was a really simple real estate goal tracking thing. So every time that I set a goal, and I set a big goal, and I remember in my head, like, wow, that's a really big goal. And then I just started, every time I had a closing, how much that closing was. And it had like this little bar. I remember the little bar across the bottom, like going up. And I was like, I eclipsed my goal that I had. I was like, wow, that's a really big goal. So that was back in 2010, man. That's 14 years ago. And I remember that. So I think that's what primed me to start to track. So then I started doing I talked about Pi time before, because you can get really in depth with finding out what your dollar per hour is. If you start, so that little thing on the phone wasn't tracking calls and connections and that. It was just a simple volume tracker, almost like unit and volume tracker. So that kind of primed me. And then I learned about pie time, and I learned about how to value, or um, how to gauge, I guess, if you will, my activities, and what those activities of the dollar per hour that I actually had when I was on the phone. So I started to be able to go, okay, I'm prospecting about, I remember thinking I was prospecting at the time, dude, because it was that short sale time. I was prospecting and talking to clients probably 2.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I was able to, like, okay, what is my dollar per hour? And it was like even back then, man, it was like $280 an hour back then. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's where it started. And then I just started tracking stuff more and more and more. And then things like Sisu and CTE, I was like, oh God, here's a great thing that's not just a volume, and I don't have to do my calls over here and my volume over here. It was all in one place. So that kind of primed me for that. And then enrolling the agents with my influence, due to my personal experience, testimonial, like social proof, like, guys, I've done this. It works. Here's something for you to use that's a little more everything all together. Like, guys, I had this sheet here or that sheet there, and I think this is all together. So the enrollment for them of, like, it worked for me. Here's something even better. I suggest you use it. And we can see from the people that are using the CTE, they're having results.
Yeah, I remember mine was on a whiteboard. My first my first tracking and accountability, only because I'm actually still very much a whiteboard guy. If you go to my studio, you'll see a whiteboard against the window there, and that's just where I get it all off my head and kind of blurt everything I'm thinking on there, and then kind of resort it and organize it again. But yeah, from the very beginning, I had my chart up. I can still picture it. I have my chart up, and the lines were very faded after some time, and I would sometimes be lazy about fixing those lines to get the chart perfectly clear again. But yeah, it was calls, conversations, and closings. I mean, that's what it was for me. That was the start, right? And that is foundational to a lot of these platforms now, obviously in an incredibly much more sophisticated and detailed way. But for me, it was calls, conversations, and closings, and understanding, to your point, when you can see the number, when you can see that it cost you, and when I say by cost, I mean time, effort, etc. What it costs you to get to the finish line, which was a closing, of course, and the commission at the end, which is what we're trying to do. When you could correlate a number or an amount of days that it took you, a number of conversations, that's where the magic was. Because the more you did that, the more you understood very clearly how close your next paycheck was. And in the very beginning, when you're a new agent or just getting started, that's what you're focused on. Like, you typically have left, you've left another job that was, giving you a check every Friday at 5. In the very beginning, it's like, well, where does my next check come from? So you're forced to, instead of floating around there, is to create some kind of system for yourself. And this accountability is so core to what we're talking about today, is because I had to be able to say, well, what did I do this week? And how much closer was it to the result that I'm after? And so having that chart and looking at it, and then being able to extrapolate a number from it and say, oh, it takes this to do this. And then back to your earlier point about reverse engineering, right? Well, now you see that number. Now you can get excited because now you know what it takes. Oh, okay. And sometimes a little bit less, of course, and a little bit more, a little fewer conversations, a little better conversations. But over the years, as you and I got better, those conversations went down. So not only were you able to clearly see what the goal was ahead and how to achieve it in terms of numbers and how many interactions and calls and conversations you have to have, but you were getting better at all of it. So that accountability also led to you becoming so much more proficient and better at it, and also exposing yourself to a lot more scenarios and conversations and rejections, objections as well, and then being able to I remember very clearly that I used to also keep track of my objections. What were they saying? How often were they saying it? Because if it was a similar objection, then I made it my business to study that objection and how to handle that objection. Because if that's the wall that I'm hitting on a regular basis with my market, my consumer, my price point, whatever it was, then it just only made sense that the better I get at that objection, the more my number is going to go up, the more effective conversations I'm going to have, and the more closings I'm going to have. So this whole idea of accountability, although it may initially look very simple in terms of, I got to make sure that on Tuesdays and Thursdays I'm making my phone calls and I'm making these many dials and I'm having conversations. It really paints a super clear picture of where you are and where you're going in congruence with your goals. That's been my experience.
I want to add one thing there, Eddie. That was perfect. And it's so much of stuff we've talked about and we're trying to convey to people, simply the simple stuff, but kind of maybe going another little bit of a next level into that, whether you're an agent maybe aspiring to grow a team or you have a team right now. I'm speaking to some people, that are thinking about EXP and so forth and growing teams and so forth. One of the things that worked, I don't know, this was a personal goal of mine. So maybe it is for somebody out there, or maybe it's not, or maybe it's something you just go, oh, let me think about this. Kind of back when we were talking about the Kiyosaki stuff, the cash flow quadrants, whether you own a business or you're a sole proprietor and so forth. The numbers help you. They've helped me. Okay. And this goes back to the admin as well, having really great admin that are partners and understand your business and understand your goals and help you see the picture. And if you trust, so I'm getting to tell a story here about trust, admin seeing the big picture with you, and numbers. So the numbers, you can tell what percent of the volume of the team that you as a team leader are doing. And what you want, if you want to create a business, is you want your percentage of production to go down. You want the total production of the team obviously to go up, but you don't want it to be like I was when I first started. I mean, more than 60 or 70% of the volume of the team. Gradually, what I can see is that going down. And also there was a kind of a line right around when I was like around 40% of the team. Okay. And I had great agents that I knew I could hand off. Not all of them I can hand off $1 million buyer or any listing, but there are 2 or 3 now that I'm like, they can do this. So you got to have that. So you got to build those people too. Back to that Carnegie thing. If we don't build businesses, we build people, and people build businesses. Because you can't just hand off. So anyways, my point here was there was this point, Eddie, and the ladies on my team said it to me multiple times. They're like, Alex, you said, Alex. So this was like, you said you wanted to have a business. You said that you wanted to be out of production. This is what you said. Buddy, you got to let go. We're at 40%. You can give off these, because we get the call-ins from Google and Zillow. I was on the Zillow calls and all that, and I'm there still doing I got to get on it. I got to make that call. I got to hunt and kill. And I'm not killing anybody, but shouldn't have said that. But anyways, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. You're out there, you're hunting as a prospector, which is a metaphor. But anyways, my point was, they're like, buddy, you got to let go. If this is what you said you want, you can do it. You just have to have the courage. So this is the same stuff that I impart on them. Have courage, have discipline, have awareness of what you even want. And then are your actions in alignment with that? Like, buddy, you got to let go. Your action has to be actually to not take action. And so now we can see that my production this year is about 20%. of the total team. So I want that to probably go down to maybe 10. You know, where I get a referral that comes in, or somebody that's a friend. I mean, but dude, I've even been giving out referrals of million plus buyers. So I'm like, but I feel myself, Eddie. That's the discipline. You feel yourself wanting to stay in bed. Who wins? Your discipline of getting out of bed when you said you're going to get out of bed, or does your ego win of the comfort? And the same metaphor is here of, I'm comfortable going out and working with buyers and sellers. I don't like it. I don't loathe it, but I don't like it. So if that's the case, I just so appreciate my staff and how that's that trust and that awareness of the business and their understanding of my vision of what I want, and them having enough trust in me for them to say, buddy, you gotta let go. I mean, I'll be like, hey, what are you talking about? You're fired. No, I mean, I would never do that. But my point, right? Like, just having the awareness around all of it, the numbers will show you if you want to get out, and where are you at? How close are you at? You can't just, if you've got one person on the team and they've only sold 10 properties, you're not going to be able to just give them everything. You got to build that person up, role play, phone jams, call nights, drilling, coaching them up. And then you can start handing stuff off to them. And then the percentage of the team leader's production starts to go down, but the whole volume of the team doesn't go down. Make sense?
Makes total sense. No, and I think you put some great icing on this cake of the conversation today, because we really took it from the agent perspective to leadership perspective, right? The accountability, because you've announced to your team and certainly to your management that this is where we're going. And so for them to hold you accountable that's that wonderful circle, right? I think,
yeah, man.
And to give them, and kudos to you to give them that empowerment too, and to found the right people that are comfortable stepping up to you and saying, no, this is what you asked us. This is what you charged us to do, Alex. And for them to also have the ability to do that, right? That's a couple steps in there. Not only have the authority to do so, but have the ability inside them to kind of stop you in your tracks and say, no, it's not what you said. I think that's a nice, closing to this accountability topic, which obviously never stops. But I'd love to hear, I think we both, Alex, you and I would probably love to hear some of the accountability steps and processes you have taken in your career. What has worked for you from an agent perspective? What has worked for you from a leadership perspective? We'd love to see those in the comments and continue the conversation. Because all of this, everything that we share here on the Relevant Agent podcast is just to make you better. And so as we look towards 2025, accountability is certainly going to be a ongoing thread, especially in the beginning when we all say we're going to do X, Y, and Z in 2025, and we're going to kill it, and we're going to crush it, we're going to do all these wonderful things. And then mid-year 2025 comes and you look back and you're like, I didn't follow through. So come up with your accountability, share in the comments your accountability successes, and we'll see you on the next one for our continued sessions about making 2025 your best year in real estate. I know you got to go, buddy. Have a great morning, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bob.